Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to The Black Tower Show. I'm your host, Nathan Ford. We're broadcasting 1040 AM, 92.1 FM, WYSL Rochester, New York, in BC Studios, upstate New York. Jake Fox is here in BC Studios. And take a look outside, because it's just not stopping out there. It's getting a little ridiculous. And I'm thinking about buying a sleigh. Maybe we should get a sleigh, because apparently you need one. Because I think there's over a foot of snow out there, and we don't know how we're going to get home. But you know what? We got work to do. In studio, what an honor to have Richard Dolan on the Black Tower Show. Richard Dolan, among the world's leading researchers and historians of the UFO subject. He's the author of 2 volumes of history, UFOs in the National Security State, and these are comprehensive volumes of information. I encourage you to go out and get these. Richard Dolan, UFOs in the National Security State, Volumes 1 and 2, as well as the analysis of the future entitled AD After Disclosure, when the government finally reveals the truth about alien contact. We're going to be talking about that with Richard Dolan. He's a regular guest on Coast to Coast AM radio, has also appeared on many television specials for the History Channel, Sci-Fi, BBC, and elsewhere. Richard Dolan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure, Jake. Glad that you're having me on here. It's really nice. And in fact, it's very nice to be talking with someone who's in the Rochester area.
I know. It's coming down out there. It's kind of ridiculous, you know. But I guess
I'm looking out my window. I'm here in Rochester right here with you, and I'm looking out my window, and we're getting slammed by snow.
All right, the UFO cover, but we talk about it on the show a lot, okay, and doing the research on you and your work in many interviews online. You've discussed this idea that the UFO cover-up has shifted from, let's say, the president and heads of state into international and private hands. Can you go into that a little bit? Yeah. Richard Dolan, our guest on the Black Tower Show.
Thank you. Well, yes, I think forget UFOs for a moment. Just look at the structure of world power in general. And I think it's fair to say, if you ask most people, for example, is the U.S. president the guy running the show in our country? I think most people instinctively are going to understand, not really. I think we're understanding more and more in our world today that presidents aren't so much elected as they are selected. Who's doing the selecting? Well, it's usually not you and me. It's usually very powerful financial interests. And indeed, those interests are not just national, they are global. I mean, we're in a global society. We have a situation in which multinational interests, financial, especially banks, straddle the globe. They're more powerful than any nation. So yes, we've moved into a world of international, transnational power. And in my own studies of the UFO phenomenon, and it's a real phenomenon, sure, I've talked about it all you like. But my analysis of this, the structure of secrecy around that, is that it is also similarly privatized, similarly international, and that the U.S. president, yes, he matters, yes, he's a player, but he's not. He's basically, he's a sales rep. That's what every president is here to sell you. Globalization, he's here to sell you whatever new war comes on the road, but he's basically working for someone else. So that's the situation. Mm-hmm. And when you get into what we call the black budget society, black budget community, people spending all that, again, what we find is that it's dominated by private corporations, not really Department of Defense people. It's really private contractors. So that's what it looks like. It's privatized.
And what is the intention of these people that are, holding this and going out, these private companies that you're talking about? What is their intent? What is the reason for them to be bankrolling it, if you will?
Right. This is one of the most important questions a person could ask. I'm glad that you asked it. I mean, I fell into this topic about 20 years back then. I was doing a doctoral dissertation on U.S. Cold War history, Harry Truman and the Russians, the birth of the CIA, and all of that. That was my life. And I stumbled into the UFO subject back in the early 90s. And one of the questions that I asked myself was, well, why would there be secrecy about this at all? I mean, what is the problem with ordinary people knowing if there are objects that are able to do extraordinary things that are not supposed to be explainable, that maybe they come from somewhere else, maybe they're from some secret human development, but what is the big deal? Well, I think I have a handle on that answer now. Not 100%, but I think I understand. And let's just go back in time, and let's just say that something like a crash of a UFO at Roswell did happen. So just for the sake of argument, say that it did. I happen to think that it did. I've done a lot of research into it. I'm persuaded that it happened. So let's just say it did happen. So it's 1947, and your military has just recovered technology that is so advanced, so beyond us, that it's not from civilization. And you're the president, and you're told. So the question is, what would you do? Would you announce it to the world? You might want to. You might think the world has the right to know. But I'll tell you this: all of your advisors around you would say, maybe not a good idea, Mr. President. Because if you tell the world that you've got this, it's going to be very, very hard not to share this technology with everyone else in the world, including the Russians, who at the time, by the way, were trying to steal America's atomic secrets, and they eventually did. America did not want to share its secrets to the atomic bomb. Why would they want to share something as exotic as alien technology as they got? So right off the bat, you have a very important incentive for secrecy. You don't want anyone to know that it's real. And if you admit it's real, it's going to be very hard. So you have secrecy. And then what happened? Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, we're talking to Richard Dolan on the Black Tower Show, broadcasting 1040 AM, 92.1 FM. Richard Dolan, talking about the UFO cover-up. We're talking the idea of it being contained in private hands and being bankrolled, and what the intent of that is. And yes, it has to do with perhaps protecting those technological advances. And it makes me think about, well, how far ahead our government is as far as their technologies. We've had Paul Laviolette on the show talk about things like electrogravitics and different propulsion and this technology. Yeah, it might be in the best interest of those people to not have that information come out.
Well, for sure. And I'll just tell you a quick story along those lines. I had a conversation a number of years ago with a very prominent scientist who back in the 1960s worked for the NSA. Now, these days, everyone's hearing about the NSA through Edward Snowden. Back in 1964-65, this man worked at the NSA when nobody knew about the NSA. And he said to me that at that time, the NSA had computers running at a clock speed of about 650 megahertz, which today that's nothing. Anyone's laptop could beat that. But keep in mind, the consumer market did not reach that speed until around the year 2000, so about 35 years later. So the NSA on that basis, you could say, was about 35 years ahead of the rest of the world in computing power. And what makes it really interesting is that in 1964-65, nobody knew about the NSA. It was essentially still an unknown agency. There had been one book published about that included the NSA in 1964. That was the first time. So you have a secret agency with the best computers in the world. And that was the case way back then, way ahead of the rest of it. So is it possible today? Of course it's possible. What we call the black budget world, classified world, is well ahead. And what they do is they classify a lot of the patents. They classify the technology so that if you are a smart inventor and you come up with a nifty idea that just happens to be something that the black budget world is dealing with, you will not be able to get a patent. It will become classified. That's a fact. We have thousands of classified patents. But back to the whole UFO secret, my theory on this is very simple, which is that back in the 40s and 50s, when this whole thing got started, as a result of a government/military decision, that it became privatized over the years. And I think what happens is simply that you have the Army, let's say, gets hold of some Roswell technology. Well, at some point, the Army is going to have to let their private contractors take a look at it. If they're going to try to reproduce it, they'll take it to General Electric, or Lockheed, or Boeing, the contractors who make things for the military. Because those are the companies that have the scientists, they've got the research and development, they've got the engineers to make them. So the technology gets segued out, very compartmentalized, to these various companies. And that's better for secrecy, too, because now the secret isn't so much classified, it is proprietary. And then when you're in the Army and then you retire, You go to work for Lockheed as a senior vice president, and now you're in the program, and you're making lots of money like they are because this technology is valuable. And I'm not saying that we've been able to duplicate everything that we've uncovered, but I would bet you that the recovered technologies prompted some very, very good ideas and developments in our own technology. And this has been claimed for a long time now, whether it's the transistor itself, the most important invention of the 20th century, or integrated circuits, or fiber optic, or lasers, or what have you. It's hard to you try to go to the origin of these inventions. They get very cloudy because it's still proprietary. If you go to the Wikipedia entry, they'll tell you it's Bell Labs, but did Bell Labs get an assist from Roswell Tech? Many people believe that is the case. So we have a world in which a lot of the most important things about our world are still kept secret.
We're talking to Richard Dolan on the Black Tower Show, broadcasting 1040 AM, 92.1 FM WYSL. Richard Dolan, among the world's leading research historians of the UFO subject, and we're breaking it down right now.
So you're saying this secret space program / breakaway civilization is a public-private partnership? Who is involved in this? Is this, does it involve what, Ray McGovern calls the other part of the CIA, the one the public does not see? I mean, are areas of finance involved in this? I mean, NASA? I mean, what's going on here exactly?
Yeah, great question. I'll do my best to answer it because, again, you're asking all of the questions that I continue to ask to this day. I'll tell you why I believe that there is such a thing, first of all. And I have talked about what I call a breakaway civilization. And basically, what is that? It's the concept that I think is true. I can't prove that it's true even to this day. But if you look at the classified world and you understand that it is often decades ahead of the rest of us in technology, I was talking about like that, say science, and then you add in, you factor in exotic technology that does not originate from our civilization. And you factor in the fact that this remains classified and that the secrets have to be kept year after year. So then extrapolate out. The scientists in the classified world who are working on this exotic technology, eventually they're going to have a couple of eureka moments where they'll come up with new ideas. And some of those are really good money makers, like better technology that can make its way into the defense industry and they can become investors and all that. But what if some of their ideas are too good even for that? So, for example, if they come up with anti-gravity or they come up with a way of eliminating petroleum as our most important source of energy. Well, if they do that and that gets out there goes the petroleum industry, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So this would be something that would stay classified. So the rest of the world would not have access to it, but they would continue to research. They would continue to do their thing. Could they develop a flying saucer secretly? I think yes, they could. Of course they could. If they do that, can they do other things? Could they go off the planet easily? Maybe they could. Could they do all of these things that would actually make their culture so different from ours that it might be considered a separate civilization of its broken ways of harm? And that's the idea of a breakaway civilization, and I believe that is the case. It's not something that I've been able to prove, and I've been very upfront about this. It's an idea that I put out there. I have noticed a lot of researchers kind of like the idea. They've latched onto it, that some people have really run with it well. But I think that is the case. I think one of the key things that this deeply classified breakaway group is trying to do is to reproduce their version of UFOs. They're trying to make their own flying saucers, basically. I have myself personally interviewed so many witnesses, some of them military people, who have seen what looks like man-made UFOs, man-made ones. And I'm at the point where I think that's what's happening. And that includes a secret space program. And I'd be happy to talk about why I think there is a secret space program.
Sure. So we're talking about a possible breakaway civilization. So that means like a moon base is possibly on the table, a Mars base is possibly on the table. If these people are interplanetary, like you're talking about, none of those things are out of the question at all. I mean, what do you think about that?
I have to admit that is true. None of those things are off the table. They're all possible. I do think that if there is a breakaway civilization, that still the action is on Earth. I mean, this is where all stuff's going down. There's all the people are here on Earth. There's a lot of stuff happening here, and I suspect that Earth is still the main theater of operation. Would there be a base? Could there be? I used to think such a thing was impossible, right? But the more I learn, the more I don't think it's impossible. I will tell you, I had a conversation a number of years ago with one of the leading scientists who developed America's remote viewing program, that's Russell Clark. Russell's still around. He's probably about close to 80 now, I'm guessing. A number of years ago, Russell said to me, Richard, in the early 1980s, it was one of my assignments was to train remote viewers at Fort Meade, Maryland, whose job was to remote view the far side of the moon. That's exactly what he said to me. And I said, well, Russell, why would they do that? Very innocently. And he said, why do you think? I said, I don't know. Were they looking for E.T.? And he said, bingo. Yes, they were looking for E.T. I said, did they find E.T.? He said, well, that I don't know. That wasn't part of my mission. But here's the thing. I believe, Russell, if the U.S. military had reason to look for E.T. on the far side of the moon, I'm sure they had good reason. Even using psychics. So there's activity on the moon, I think. Now, do we have bases there? Again, one hears these types of rumors and leaks coming out. Nothing confirmed. Admittedly, nothing is confirmed. But I don't believe that this is out of the question. That we have the capability, that in the classified world we've mastered gravity to the extent that we can go off-world. And that would include Mars, I suppose. Why not? I mean, I would think you'd want to go underground. You need a source of energy that can create oxygen. On the moon, if you have water, which we now know there is, you can extract oxygen out of the H2O that's frozen. So, actually not that impossible when you get right down to it. I don't know that this is the case. But I'll tell you this. One thing I know that we have are a lot of bizarre anomalies that are in Earth orbit that have been recorded, whether by NASA or by other agencies, the European Space Agency, Russians, Chinese are there, especially the Russians. There are things that have happened in Earth orbit that are not explainable as releases of ice crystals outside the space shuttle. Some of these can be. But there's some very bizarre things. So that there are objects, I would argue, in Earth's atmosphere that have so far, in my own view, defied any kind of reasonable conventional explanation. So who owns these objects? Do we or do some other group? In my opinion, whatever the answer is, we have a secret space program because I guarantee you the U.S. military is going to want to study whatever is up there. And they don't want prying minds. So they would have to have a secret space program. And then the other thing to keep in mind is this. You know, we all hear recently about NASA ending their manned missions out in space and so forth. I'll guarantee you the U.S. military will never, ever end its attempted dominance of space. They must do that in order to have military dominance around the world. Space is the true center of gravity for U.S. military dominance. They have to control space. They must have a highly classified component of technology that's in space. And I don't think you get an argument probably even from military analysts on that. The question is how secret, how advanced, how exotic is this technology? I am convinced that a good portion of it has to do with the existence of other beings that are also out there in orbit checking us out.
How aware are other countries of our secret space program? Or is it kind of a shared thing? I've heard other researchers talk about it's almost a NATO Anglosphere type operation.
Yeah, what you have, definitely there's a strong international component to it. Think about what Edward Snowden has been saying lately about the nature of the NSA spying. One of the key things he's saying is that it's not just the NSA. It's NSA, it's GCHQ in Britain, it's MI5, MI6 in Britain, it's the German intelligence surveillance, it's French, and it's the Australians, it's the Canadians, it's New Zealand. All of these nations share data with each other. So they're all spying around the world, and they all share. And in fact, what it certainly is looking like to a lot of people is that they are legally independent of any kind of national law. And that is indeed what it looks like. Whose laws do they adhere to? I don't know if anyone does. But what we're talking about is kind of extra-legal international collaboration that is really beyond even formal government control. It's not like Barack Obama has a whole lot of control over the NSA's program, because a lot of it is comes down to treaties and international law. That's some kind of international arrangement. So that's been shared. And I believe, like, when you look at the history of UFO, like, there have been a number of crashes of what appear to be UFOs around the world, not just at Roswell. There was an interesting case in Bolivia in 1978, another case in Brazil in 1997, and a number of others, many. And what we find is that frequently U.S. military personnel and officials are on the scene. So there's a collaboration. Now, why does another nation not just jump the gun and give the secret up? Fair question. But I think the answer to that is that the United States intelligence community scares the hell out of everybody. Like, if you were the president of Brazil and you wanted to stick it to the United States and you wanted to give up this secret, it's not as easy as you might think. First of all, NSA spies would know exactly every single conversation you have, and that's a fact. So if you're planning to do it, you better have a lot of bodyguards around you, or you might wind up dead before you make a statement.
You mentioned a lot of these declassified government documents. You know, I know that in some of your interviews you've mentioned, like, the Twining memo. But what are some of the, like, kind of the more recent documents, declassified documents? What is it that you're learning from them? And it kind of alludes to this
I'm
point.
I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah.
Well, here's what we're finding. There are something like close to, I think, about 20,000 pages of declassified documents that we have relating to UFOs through Freedom of Information from the United States. Let's forget other countries for a minute. Of that total, more than 50% of what we have today come from the Jimmy Carter years. If you can believe that, from the late 70s. I mean, it's great for Jimmy Carter, and it's kind of sucky for every president that has followed. In other words, the Freedom of Information Act was very, or much more, user-friendly right after Watergate, right after Vietnam, during the Carter years, when President Carter actively promoted a liberal interpretation of the Freedom of Information Act. And as a result of that, a number of researchers were able to shake that tree, and a lot of documents did come out. Even then, it was not a slam dunk. Even then, a lot of the documents were heavily censored, especially the ones that were top secret and higher. But a lot of confidential and restricted memos and memos that were just classified as secret did come out. The Twining memo, Benjamin Lincoln Twining in 1947, was one of them. And that's an important memo, for sure. That's from a 3-star general who later became Chief of Staff of the Air Force, admitting in 1947 that this is real. This is not visionary. It's not fictitious. Our military has encountered these disc-shaped objects. They are incredible. And he's laying it out. He's stating it in this memo. Now, since an executive order by President Reagan in 1982, it's been much more difficult. Freedom of Information's had its ups and downs, mostly downs, especially related to UFOs. So basically what that has meant is to file a Freedom of Information Act request in the U.S. since then is expensive, and agencies are not obligated to respond quickly either. They can take their sweet time, take months or years or more, and say, oh yeah, press the process is $10,000. And that effectively, that's made it very difficult. also what we find, I've talked to a lot of students who work in the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, U.S. Mission. And honestly, it is so easy for government agencies to keep documents out of circulation. There's certain types of statuses that they can give a document so that it's not eligible to be declassified. And it's a basic game that is very easy to play. And then you can ship documents off to other agencies, and they don't even know how to find their own documents. Like if you were working at Naval Intelligence and someone were to file a FOIA request with your office asking for such and such information, there are hundreds of computers where that information might be. They're not all easily linked. It's not as easy as people think to get.
It's just fascinating, the content of these documents, because it alludes to the point where our own government is like, we don't know what this is. Like, what is this flying machine? It's silent, disc-shaped dome that's floating around, and we don't know what it is. I mean, this is fascinating stuff, right?
The most important thing, is that these massive documents, none of them by themselves of the official documents prove that UFOs are aliens. But I'll say this. You take the top 10, the top 20, the top 50, the top 100, and you look at them as a group, and they absolutely show that this is a phenomenon that's real, and that is not supposed to exist. But there it is, because our military's been encountering it. And just like you said, silent, disc-shaped, non-inertial turns, all the things that we're like, how does that happen? And they're doing it. So to me, that's the most fascinating thing. When you have a government that says, no, we're not having a UFO phenomenon, nothing like that, we're not interested. And then at least a smattering of these documents come out that prove exactly the opposite. Who's not going to be interested in that? That's what I would say. That's fascinating.
I wanted to get your thoughts quickly on what do you think about Charles Hall and his work where he talks about actually living among these tall white beings, working with them and interacting with them, and the way that he talks kind of very candidly about that.
Yes, indeed. I met Charles Hall briefly on one occasion, about 10 years ago. I had a very good impression of him, I will say that. I haven't really communicated much with him. I've watched his videos. I know a few people who have interacted with him. And what he says is it's quite an extraordinary thing that there are these non-human beings in Nevada. They're working with the knowledge of the U.S. government there, but they have a lot of independence, and they're called the Tall Whites. Is he telling the truth? I think he's probably telling the truth. Now, my attitude as a historian, that's my training, is I don't know how to deal with that information until I start getting other types of corroboration. I will say that I have personally interviewed a number of individuals over the years who also have had interactions with similar types of beings. Mm. So these stories are out there. That is, in other words, blonde, intensely telepathic beings, intensely telepathic, who honestly don't really give much of a damn about people as far as we can tell. I'm not saying they hate us, but it doesn't seem like they're in love with us either. They're just out there doing their thing. So that appears to be what Charles Hall is talking about, and I will say that at some point I would like to solidify my own opinion on it and actually meet him and have an extended interview with him. But I'm not inclined to dismiss it.
You mentioned earlier when talking about the secret space program and the breakaway civilization that there were other beings involved in the secret space program. Who are these other beings you're talking about?
Maybe I mentioned that in a lecture I gave at some point. I was probably speculating, but let's speculate. Mm-hmm. All right. First of all, this is just going to go deep. How much time do we have? I don't want to lose our thread here. I want to be able to get everything in here at the amount of time.
We have another 30 minutes.
Do we go for? Okay. I'm trying to pace myself here.
No, let's take our time. It's
in my. Oh, I'm enjoying this with you. I'm having a great time here. In my own research, and not just mine, other people's research too, there seem to be a number of types of creatures, beings, entities that people have reported. In my own research, I have definitely encountered people who have had their own encounters with beings that look totally human, very much like what Charles White said. But they're not like you and me. They're not like regular people. They're, as I said, they're very telepathic. They're very hands-off with most people. They're not really interested in interacting. But there are, again, we're dealing with the land of leaks, the land of rumor, but there are indications that some of these beings have been working within the U.S. national security structure. And I couldn't tell you one way or the other if they participate in the space program or not, but why wouldn't they? I mean, honestly, why wouldn't they? Now, I had a story from former NASA employee Clark McClellan. Clark worked at NASA down in Florida for, I think, about 30 years. He was friends with all the Apollo and Gemini astronauts. Clark himself was a qualified space shuttle commander. He didn't fly missions, but he was qualified to do so. And he's retired now. Clark said to me, and I think he's put this out there on his website, but I got this from a person. Now, when he was working at NASA, he was briefly, momentarily, he had access to a classified feed of what was in a space shuttle at the time. And what Clark said to me was outside the space shuttle, they were doing like some outside exercise, like either a minor repair or something. And Clark said to me that there was a normal astronaut out there, and then he said one that was like a giant. He said bigger than Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player. He said, we don't have any astronauts that were 7 feet tall, let alone 9 feet tall, which is what this guy looked like. He had a different type of helmet, not a standard NASA type of helmet. Crazy story. This is what Clark said he saw briefly until the feed was cut. He says he saw it by accident. He's adamant to this day that he knows what he saw. Is it truthful? Don't know. Don't know. Could he have mistakenly seen something? These sorts, the longer you stay in this field, the crazier the stories are that come to you. And, you know, I'm of the attitude where I chalk it up. The researcher Stanton Friedman has an expression that I love. He said, if something, if it's an unknown fact, he says, I put it in my gray basket. I put it in my gray basket. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's false. I'll put it over here and I'll wait for something else to corroborate.
That's the nature.
But I don't know if there's
a lot of
collaboration with other species.
There's a lot of stuff in the gray basket.
Yes, there is.
But I mean, looking at the political side of it and the active cover-up of it, that ends up being a lot of what you're focusing on. You know, that's a huge part of it because that's something that you can look and see. You know, you are hiding these important, this important information.
Absolutely. There are certain things, that's right, that we absolutely do know, and I always come back to that. I mean, this is a frustrating field because we are dealing with secrecy. And if someone doesn't like it, well, I'm sorry, but we deal with a world of secrets, not just UFOs. In my goodness, there's secrets in every facet of our world, and I think people can realize it. But with the UFO topic, there's a tremendous amount of secrecy. But there is a certain core of data that is not arguable. It's real. And as we were talking about before, there are a certain number of very compelling declassified documents that attest to the reality of a phenomenon that, like I keep saying, is not supposed to exist. Encounters by fighter pilots that track objects on radar. They see them visually. The objects sometimes can disable their navigation in electronics equipment. Can easily outperform them. And I would just say informally, I've met a number of military people who have added to that with their own personal UFO stories while they were in the military. These are not government documents. But I can tell you that any researcher who looks for these people, these military people, is going to find them all out, particularly Navy, a lot of Air Force. They're having a lot of experiences with unknown phenomena that are utterly extraordinary in nature. I think that, some of it is we're trying to duplicate it. So if you see a perfect black triangle, for example, silently hovering over you and then moving off, maybe that's something that we made. I think that is quite possible, but maybe not. I've spent the last 10 years really trying to puzzle out what is going on if there is a secret classified component for our technology. What are we using it for? Why wouldn't the U.S. military use it to win the wars in Iraq or Afghanistan? Wouldn't it come in handy to have your own fleet of flying saucers? I would think so. I try to ask myself, why wouldn't they? I think the answer is that because the mission of those technologies is of such a highly classified nature that they can't even waste it on mere geopolitical warfare.
Well, and our government is using that. Our government is using that technology to make even more powerful, deadly weapons. I mean, I would assume nothing from my own government. Maybe I'm a little pessimistic, but that you got to assume that a lot of these technologies are being used to further dominate and control people around us, which is, a certain amount of frontierism and that kind of American way. And you wonder, a lot of this technology is helping us. The drones are up there floating around, and no one's even talking about it. You wonder. This technology we have is just fascinating. They have a drone now that'll actually. I was just reading an article where they'll deliver beer to you. There's a drone.
Yeah, Amazon. They were going to deliver their products with a drone. Domino's Pizza was going to deliver a pizza to you with a drone. They have drones the size of flies that can come into your house and spy on you in the shower. I mean,
but when we're talking about downloading our consciousness and how kind of closely connected we are to computers now, our wants and desires are going to be made manifest in a technological sort of way, in the interface of a computer. And then the use of, propulsion, drone activity is going to make things readily available. They're going to know what Jake is thinking and what you're doing.
Sure.
And be able to either destroy you or bring you a case of beer, depending on what it is that's going on. But Richard Dolan, our guest on the Black Tower Show, what's the world going to look like when it is disclosed?
Well, yeah, I wrote AD After Disclosure a couple of years ago. Actually, I have a new book out, which I'd love to talk to you about before we end the show.
Absolutely.
But AD After Disclosure was a great adventure writing that book. I had a co-author, Bryce Zabel, who was a great guy, and we clicked on this book. Really, the whole idea is it's premised on two things. Three things. If you believe UFOs are real, which we do, if you believe that there's secrecy about the topic, which we do believe, then you might ask yourself two questions. Can that secret ever end? Is it possible? And if that secret ends, what next? How would that rock our world? It's basically what we try to set out and answer. And the first question, you might think, well, it's impossible for the secret to end anyway. Why do you think it will end? They've had secrecy for all these years. What makes you think the government's just going to give it up at some point in the future? I agree with that. My argument is that the government will never voluntarily give it up, but that our society is moving ahead into a future so rapidly different that events will very probably force an admission. I think it can really happen. Whether it's a leak of sensitive government information, and now, with Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, we're seeing this exact type of phenomenon happen, and I think it can happen with UFOs. Or there could be a mass sighting that is multiply captured on many, many devices. We're getting to the point where we can easily do that. So I think something will force it. I don't know what it will be. But when that moment comes, when the President of the United States is basically forced to make a decision, I think it's going to change everything in this world because, it's not so simple as the President just saying, ladies and gentlemen, it's come to my attention that some of this UFO phenomenon is real. And what does he say next? Well, I'm going on vacation. I'll catch you guys in 6 months later. I'm sure he'd like to, but he won't be able to do that because there's a lot of follow-up questions like, who are these other beings? How have you kept this secret all these years? There's going to be a lot of people wanting to know how they were managing such an illegal type of secrecy for all these years. What that says about our media, what that says about our political institutions, our academic world. I think it'll cause a major house cleaning. And then the major change, I think, will have to do with energy. Because even a 10-year-old kid, once they start realizing what these UFOs are, is going to realize that whatever they're using to go from point A to point B, it's not gasoline. It's not petroleum. It's something different. Whether it's using zero-point energy or some form of electrogravitics, whatever it is, it's a non-petroleum answer, and that means a radical transformation of our world. A lot of things are going to get shaken up, and that's only the beginning. When Bryce and I wrote AD After Disclosure, it was an adventure, I say, because we were really trying to sit down like a think tank and to look at society and to understand how, whether it's in terms of energy, whether it's in terms of finance, in terms of geopolitics, in terms of culture, in terms of religion and science, all of these things, I think, will be dramatically affected by the disclosure of the reality of UFO. And after we finished it, I realized, gee, now I think I understand a little better why there is such secrecy on the topic, because this is such a revolutionary subject. I mean, it really truly is. And that's why it's been kept under wraps all these years.
I think I read an article in the Daily Mail that Julian Assange was quoted in the Daily Mail as saying, part of the future WikiLeaks dumps, because he's been leaked UFO related leaks from the U.S. government, and he said future WikiLeaks dumps will include, leaks from inside sources in the government about UFOs. I mean, I can only imagine what that could be. Yeah.
Well, he said that a couple of years ago, and, nothing has come out. But you're right. He did say that. And so, that just proves my point. I mean, I think that there's something out there. There's information that, if it were released, could truly be, just turn everything upside down. And I think it's a matter of time. So it's not that I'm saying, disclosure is going to be a wonderful thing and we're all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya and fix the world. I don't think it's going to be quite that simple. I think disclosure is going to be a very rough ride and filled with a lot of debate and argument and bitterness. Just because we're able to get a disclosure about the phenomenon doesn't mean that we're going to have a little gray alien on a podium answering questions for the press club. They may still be very reclusive, and that means you'll have arguments over are they good guys or are they evil? Are they here to help us or are they here to eat us? Are they demons from the Bible, or are they time travelers, or are they from another place? No one's going to know the answer to this any more than they do today. And the arguments will continue. So I don't think disclosure is going to be the end of anything so much as the start of a new phase in our attempt to understand.
We're talking to Richard Dolan on the Black Tower Show, among the world's leading research historians of the UFO subject. Let's get into your latest book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, a fresh guide to an ancient mystery.
Yes.
Talk about this.
Yeah, I just love this book. I want my readers to love it as much as I do. It's a 500-page, completely fresh, new overview of the entire subject of UFOs as far as I was able to conceive it. So I'm a historian, so there's a lot of history in this book, going from ancient aliens right up to today, what I think are some of the most intriguing, interesting sightings but there's so much more. I have an entire chapter on strange science of UFOs. I mean, everything from propulsion to dimensions to string theory to consciousness itself. In other words, all of these things that connect in one way or another to the UFO phenomenon so that we can understand it better. I have chapters on the nature of contact itself, or at least what appears to be the nature of contact, and whether that's abduction or other types of experiences that people have. Chapters dealing with almost philosophically about this. That is, how do we even know what a UFO is in our day and age when drones are flying around all over the place, and Adobe After Effects is able to create, fake videos that really look good. And how do we, in other words, have critical thinking skills? How can we, each of us, be good armchair researchers right from our desktop, from our computer, when we come across a UFO story? I have a lot of fun. And then there's several chapters dealing with the politics, which is something that has obsessed me for years, and really trying to go into a deep political analysis of this. So I'm trying to deal with the UFO topic, in other words, in a fresh way, something that I think forward-thinking people will appreciate, something that's not like a tired 1985 book on UFO sightings or how to investigate or whatever. It's got the whole topic from as fresh a point of view as I could manage. Something I think for young people, even more than experienced people. Got a lot of illustrations in there, but it's a good read. So for me, it's the new, fresh overview of the whole topic. I think something that's been long overdue, and I was so glad that I took the time to buy it. It took me 2 years to write that book.
It makes me think about just the time that we live in now, and the idea that you can make really, kind of hoax videos and sightings, and how to weed through that is interesting, because that could be a tactic that is probably being employed by our government in many different ways, as far as like putting out information that's misleading, that's wrong, and how to weed through that.
Right.
But yeah, we're also at the same time where people have their cell phones, and the truth can be kind of thrown out there very, very quickly as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, it seems. Absolutely
right. You couldn't have put it better. And one of the things that I try to point out for people is that when you get, we're in an age of Facebook, and where copy and paste rumor just goes crazy in that medium, and then there's YouTube, and there's a lot of fake information there. So there are a number of things that any interested person can do just to fact check a claim. There's something called, if you get an image of an alleged object or thing or something, you can use what's called a reverse image search. I think more and more people are starting to learn what this is, but a lot of people still don't. It wasn't even really widespread until 2011. Basically what you could do is you could take any JPEG image, and drop it into Google image search bar. And it will search and it will find all examples of that image, and it will appear right on your search screen. So in other words, you can find, are there any other examples of this, and was this picture pulled from some other website, and on and on and on. And it doesn't take more than a couple of seconds to do it. I encourage people, and I try to lay this out. I give an example in the book of how to search an idea by date. In other words, if you come across a claim that such and such other thing is real, how do you find the origin of that claim? It's very important to find the first instance of a claim. It really can go a long way to helping to decide if it's legitimate or not. And I walk readers through, like, this is how you do it. This is how you actually do some decent, quick, useful armchair research so that you don't become a sucker for this next fearmonger or fantasy peddler that's out there. You can actually use your critical thinking skills. So that's another part of the book. It's just, in other words, what I try to do is to create a completely well-balanced, a sophisticated introduction of UFOs for any reader. If you had a friend who's a skeptic on UFOs and says, what's up with this nonsense? My hope is that this would be the book you would have, UFOs for the 21st century mind.
Well, Richard Dolan,
anyway,
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We'd love to have you back on the show again. We're sorry for the inconveniences with the sound, but we want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Guys, it was my pleasure.